Hey guys, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. On this episode, we have Mike from North Carolina, and he wanted to share his creepy Bigfoot experiences that he had in the forest, and he also wanted to relay some of the paranormal experiences that he's had throughout his life. North Carolina is on the map for Bigfoot encounters, and it is one of my top 10 states that I receive the most reports from. For some reason, there's a lot of activity there, and it makes me think that it's the mountains and waterways. Of course, there's a ton of forest around there. If you have had a Bigfoot encounter on the East Coast, the Midwest, or in the Rockies, please get in touch with me. I would really like to hear your Bigfoot experience and possibly log it down on the channel. I really want to start getting people from the mountain areas to reach out and share their experiences with me. I really enjoy listening to Bigfoot encounters from the Rockies. So if you're in the mountains in Canada or even Alaska, feel free to reach out to me. And for the people on the East Coast, continue getting in touch with me because I really enjoy these experiences and it helps me connect the dots. If you guys can, support the channel in any way possible, whether it's purchasing merchandise, making a donation through PayPal or the thanks button on YouTube, or by simply sharing your experience with me here on Sasquatch Theory. All right, guys, with all that being said, let's dive into Mike's Bigfoot encounter from the state of North Carolina. All right, Mike, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Just fine.
Good to hear. Mike, you're from North Carolina. If you would, tell us a little bit about yourself and your Bigfoot experiences and encounters from the very beginning, please.
Yeah. My name's Mike. I live in central North Carolina, and the experience has kind of started somewhere, I would say, back in the early 80s. I'm in my mid 50s, and this happened when I was a teenager. My father used to live out along the river country, we call it around here. It's a long area of low-lying hills and marshes and woodlands that everybody goes to hunt and fish and that kind of thing. And my father used to spend a lot of time with me. He's a very outdoor activity minded, and he's in his early 80s now, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So he's slowed down considerably. But we used to go out there and fish and camp and do things. And he lived not far from the area, and that's where all the experiences started. Um, anyway, the very beginning of it was when my father lived up near an area called Slate Rock. It was an area that was actually mined by a company for slate and what they call Carolina blue slate. Um, we used to go fishing at these creeks and lakes that were in the area quite frequently as kids, and there was a particular pond up there. They called it Pond Number Seven. That was kind of had a reputation of being a little bit creepy, especially around nighttime. There was the remains of an old Indian encampment up there that was on the backside of the hill that everybody always, I don't care who you were, if you went up there, you didn't want to stay out there after night. But and there'd been reports of people seeing things and hearing things in the wood. Well, we were up there one night and we got the same spooky feeling and never saw nothing, but we could hear the hoops and the howls. And as kids, we didn't know what the hoops and howls represented. Knowing what I know now about Sasquatch and all that, we didn't even associate it with that. But we think that's probably what that was, because there was the first occasion was one night I was walking back from up there fishing, and we found muddy footprints across the road and going into the woods. And then the next morning, the buddy of mine, he went up there with a flashlight. We were walking around and we found where he had drug a carp, a large fish, out of one of the ponds and had drug it, whatever it was, had walked on 2 feet, had drug it across the road into the tree line and had consumed it. And that was really the kind of where the thing started, with hoops and howls and just weird sounds and such. And we found where the thing was walking into the creek and the ponds getting fish at night. And so that's really kind of where we started realizing something was kind of in the area. As you know, as children, as teenagers, we really didn't know much about it, and there wasn't much talk about it back then. There was, I didn't even know what the term Bigfoot was as a teenager. It was only in my latter years that I really began to hear about it. But there was a little store right down the road from my father's that everybody used to go fish and I mean go buy fishing supplies and such. And one day I was in that store. A group of men come in, and one of them asked the store owner, the little country store, and asked him if there were any gorillas in the area. And the guy laughed and chuckled and said, "Gorillas." He said, "I think you're a little far away from something like that." And he said, "No, I swear." He said, "We were up the road here along the river in a John boat, and something crossed the pathway up there near us, where on the tree line, and they shined their spotlight on it, and they said they swore it for all practical purposes it was a gorilla." And of course, it was dismissed and kind of laughed off. But I remember hearing that as a kid, and that was before my experience. But I would say it was probably a year later, or 2 years later. My dad one day picked my friend up, and we went out to what they call Mountain Creek. Now, that's in south central North Carolina in Richmond County. And the BFRO, I believe, had years ago had a report from in that area. I don't know about at Mountain Creek, but in that general vicinity. We went out there one night, being teenagers. My dad said, set some guidelines down for us. He said, "I want y'all to stay within, shouting distance and don't get too far." And this is, like I say, bear in mind the '80s, so none of us had cell phones or anything like that. We didn't even care for flashlights as boys. We were just pretty much we just lived in the woods pretty much, camping out and all that. Wasn't afraid of anything. And where you park your car to fish, there's a boat dock, and there's a place where everybody fishes right along the pier. And there's a bridge that you walk across the bridge, and then there's a footpath. The footpath takes you way back up in the woods along the creek, runs parallel with the creek. Well, my buddy wasn't content with staying where my father had told us to stay, and he said, "I want to go across the creek and go back in there." He said, "I noticed some areas in there that there's a whole lot better fishing because the boats don't get put out at the dock and interfere with the water right there." And that made good sense. So I said, "Okay," but I said, "Can we get back before it gets dark?" And he said, "We should." I said, "I don't want my dad mad at me." So anyway, we went across the creek, and Dad was hollering at us not to get lost. And we went down the footpath, and I would say maybe an eighth of a mile. And I was telling him, I said, it's getting dark, and the woods get dark earlier because of the tree coverage. It gets darker in the woods. And he said, "Well, just a little bit more, And I'm starting to think, well, he don't even know where we're going. But anyhow, we kept proceeding, and we came upon an area that was like a clay embankment that went down to the water. And he said this would be a great place to fish, because the hillsides was so steep going down to this place. In most places, you couldn't get access to the water, but this was actually a place that had leveled out, and you could actually get to the water and throw your rod in. So we stopped, and we started to sit down and do our fishing and bait up our hooks and all that. And I looked down, there was a set of footprints, and there were 3 toes on each foot. You had a left foot impression and a right foot impression, just like a human foot, only it had 3 toes, one really big toe and 2 smaller ones. And I told my friend, I said, "Hey, take a look at this." And he said, he looked at it, he said, "What in the world is that?" And I said, "I don't know." And it was human-like. Of course, we kind of, not knowing about Bigfoot or anything like that, or even having it on our minds, we didn't think much about it. And he remarked, "That's an awful big fella walking around here, deformed person walking around here barefoot and in the woods out here," which was crazy with the briars and the snakes and all that. But whatever it was, had apparently had just been at the water prior to us coming up on it, because the water was still muddy, still disturbed and silty, and you could see these tracks were fresh. So I went and looked a little bit closer and slid in and got my foot all wet, of course, and muddy. And Buddy pulled me back out and made fun of me for getting too close. But I told him, I said, "Why don't we follow these footprints?" I said, I'm more curious now about that than I am about wanting to fish." I said, "Let's follow these footprints." And he said, "Well, if we go much further, it's going to be dark." And I said, "Yeah, I know." But then I kind of lost all track of what my father told me. And I was just curious, being a teenage boy. So he got his tackle box, and I didn't have a tackle box. He had a nice Plano tackle box that he kept a lot of real fishing stuff in, of course. And we walked up the path, and there was a good, excuse me a second, and there was a good little path that went along a little bit further on, and it was a clay path, and we continued and found the footprints. We tracked them all the way down the path for a good distance, probably till we were about a quarter mile in. And then all of a sudden, there were briars and thickets and things that you really could not push through as a human. I mean, it would have been almost nearly impossible. But whatever this thing was had cracked limbs and stepped over limbs and went through stuff that we couldn't get through. And I told him, I said, I don't think we can go any further. And we stopped and agreed it was just fruitless to try to even proceed it any further. Well, about that time, we noticed, both of us, the hair on our arms stood up, and we just felt at the same time, without even saying anything to each other, we felt uneasy. And you know how the crickets and the bugs and the whippoorwills, all these animals, they're making constant chatter. Well, it stopped, and it got deathly silent. I mean, you could hear a pin drop. And my buddy said, I don't like this. He said, something ain't right. And I said, yeah, I agree. Something's not right here. So we stood there a few seconds just listening to nothing. And all of a sudden we could hear heavy, heavy, deep breathing, just panting. And it got louder, and pretty soon it went into that to like a whoop, whoop. And it proceeded doing that several times. And then it went into a hoop and a growl that kind of elevated, almost like a siren, kind of went up and peaked out and came down to a low growl at the tail end of it. And it spooked me, of course, and spooked him. And but before it spooked me, it had spooked him so bad he took off running, didn't even tell me he was going to run. And by this time, it's pretty dark, but we knew the path pretty well. So he took off running hard as he could run, left me standing by myself back there. And then I realized I need to get out of there. So I took off running. Well, by the time we got back, we didn't stop till we got to about where the first clearing was, where we found the footprints. And he had tripped over something and had fallen, actually hurt his leg a little bit. But his tackle box had fallen open, every bit of his tackle all over the ground. And I got back there, and he said, what was that? And I told him, I said, I have no idea. I don't know what it was. But I said, we don't need to be back here. We need to get on. He said, I got to get my stuff. So we started to get his stuff, and the thing had actually followed us. It followed us where it was. By this time, it was sounding like it was just right around its cracking limbs and just making god awful racket and hollering. And so he said, just forget it, leave my stuff. So we left everything. We left his tackle rod, his tackle box, and his rod, everything down there. We just took and hightailed it. Well, we got back to the road, and we started to the bridge. And my dad had a flashlight. He had one of his flashlights that had the big old square 6-volt batteries in it that he kept in his toolbox. And he was standing at the bridge, shining it, and he said, hollering our names. And I told him, I said, Dad, I'm here. I'm right here. He come over and he said, I told you boys not to go way off. And I said, well, let me explain what happened. And we told him, and excuse me. And he said, well, let's get on. We need to get on. It's getting late. And he said, he looked at my friend. He said, where's your tackle box? And my friend told him, said, it's back yonder. I'm not going back there. That's what we're trying to tell you. Something's back there, and it got after us. My dad said, well, it's probably just a hog or something, a wild boar. And we said, no, it's nothing like that. And he said, well, come on, I'm not leaving that tackle box, because my dad had actually given him a spare tackle box and but a bunch of lures in it. And that's kind of how this boy lived down the road, didn't have a father. And we kind of took him on when he came to the house and really treated him nice. And he respected us for that. And he hung out with us all the time over there. And we took him to do things with us. So, and he was almost like family. So anyway, my dad and I and this fella went back across the bridge, went down this dirt road, and we walked. And I told my dad, I said, it's a pretty good piece in here. And he said, well, how far much further? And I told him, he said, let's go get it before it gets any darker. I want to get all that stuff and take it home. We got down there, and sure enough, my dad saw the footprints, and he agreed. He said, I don't know what they are either. I've never seen anything like it. He said, where's your, and we shined the light around, and there was the tackle box. So Dad held the flashlight on us, and he said, y'all get down there and put all your tackle down there, and let's get out of here. And this fishing rod was still down there too. So anyway, we started doing that. And by that time, we could smell, got off the smell you'd ever want to smell. We down at the river where this happened. Excuse me. It's not unusual to smell musky smells because of the swampiness and some of the backwaters and the stagnant water. Sometimes when it ponds up and fish kills and things. But this was not like that. This was I don't know. I couldn't even describe it. It was I've never smelled it before or since. It was one of the worst smells you ever want to smell. And my dad, they commented on it, and right after he said that, that thing started with the hoops and the hollers and the growls again, and you could hear limbs cracking, and it was clearly a sign of aggression. Whatever it was not wanting us there, and that's what we was trying to tell my dad. I said, Dad, I said something's bad. And he said, Yeah, I agree with you. He said, and we started just throwing everything we could, leaves, sticks, and everything. Anything we didn't even try to pick out the small stuff. We just scooped it all in there and hightailed it and got on back to the truck, and we talked about it all the way home, of course. And then my dad worked at that time. He's retired now, but he worked for a major glass company and made window glass for cars and high rises and all kinds of things. He worked there for many years. Retired from there actually, and he worked swing shifts. Sometimes he worked 12-hour shifts and he worked 4 days a week and that kind of thing. So sometimes I had like weekends. He had weekends off, and I'd have time to spend with him. And he was real good and wanting to take me places and things. And he said, I don't have a next day I have off is a few days, but he said, I want to come back up here and I want to get some plaster of Paris and let's make us a cast of these prints. He said, I don't know what it is, but let's get a cast of it. So we went back about 3 or 4 days later and got our plaster from the hardware store and headed up that way. Well, it had rained some one of the nights in between. So by the time we got up there, we found the prints, what was left of them, but they had been, of course, wallowed out and they weren't the definition that they were when we found them. But we cast a couple of prints. Like I said, they were not good. And that being so many years ago, I don't even begin to know where they're at now. But that was really the first encounter that I ever had with something that I could say was probably Bigfoot, not knowing at the time what it was, not even caring about it. That was my first experience, Miguel. But down there was another, some years later, there was a couple of other things that happened. If you're interested in hearing about those.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, what do you think this creature was, the three-toed creature?
Okay, bear in mind, as a child, I didn't know anything about it. My father was, I won't want to say skeptical, but he was not. He was a very practical, still is very practical, common sense, tough guy. He was just a straight up as they come, and he didn't know anything about Bigfoot either. We had no idea. But as I've got older and I've gotten interested in things, and there's so much talk about it now, I have heard that the three-toed Bigfeet are a mutated version of inbreeding. That's the best theory that they've been found, especially throughout the southern parts of the United States and Florida and on up. That and it makes sense. They're mutations. They're Sasquatch. They're Bigfoot creatures, I think, but they have mutations within their gene pool that causes three toes. And they've been reported. Three toes have been reported throughout Florida and Georgia and Mississippi and all through parts of the South, and I think even some up north. But I think it's where the populations are thin and they don't have a lot of breeding pool that they can pull from. And it taints the genetics of the creatures is what I think it is. Just to be honest.
Yeah, I don't claim to be a professional, and that sounds like an excellent theory to me. People claim that there's different types of Sasquatch, and maybe when they interbreed, you end up with these digits, whether it's three or maybe extra digits. And
Yeah.
I kind of thought maybe it was that, or possibly like another cryptid creature such as Dogman. But whenever you started talking about the whoops, that kind of sounds like Bigfoot.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, Miguel. I don't know a lot about Dogman. I've heard some about it too, but these look like human footprints, and they just did not have any claw marks or anything like that on the toes. There was three toes, and there was one big predominant toe, just like where you expect ours to be. But then there were two smaller ones instead of four others, and none of them had any claw marks like. And I would think I don't know much about Dogman. I'm not claiming to be an expert on anything, but um, I've heard some of the Dogman prints had contained claw marks. So that's why I don't think it was a Dogman. I think it was a genetically mutated um, Bigfoot is what I think it was.
Yeah, that's
Looking back,
fair enough. Did the toes look human or
yeah, they
human-like?
look. Yes, sir. They look everything about them. They look just. The only thing I will tell you about the feet. they were then they and I they were now we this was a wet ground mud area. This is all red clay, but we didn't sink down in that clay no more. We were probably 120 pounds soaking wet back then. My dad was probably a good 200 pounds, 180-pound man. We didn't sink in the ground maybe more than a quarter inch to because it's all hard ground, but it was wet near the river. But this thing had an impression depth of, I'd say, at least a half inch, if not further, in some places. And so it had some weight behind it. And the footprints were, if just going off memory, I would say anywhere from 16 to 18 inches in length. But now, instead of being straight, like a straight foot would look, they had a curvature to it. They at the arch, it had a like the toes were the whole foot. I mean, not the toes, but the whole foot was curved. Like if you were looking at the left foot, it was curved with the heel sticking out, and then the middle part kind of curving out, and then back in were the toes. And that same thing was almost like a mirror of it on the other foot. But they were human, like they were not, and they were all 1 foot. It was not. I've heard theories about a bear stepping on top of another bear's the back print stepping on the front print, but it was nothing like that. The only bears in our area are some small black eastern black bears that occasionally come up that hardly ever exceed 300 or 400 pounds, and I've only seen one or two in my entire life here in this area. And being all the woods I've been out in around here, I've never seen one or two. So, and even hunters don't see black bears much. So it definitely wasn't a black bear, and that was the only big predator animal that could have been, but it in the area, but that it wasn't that.
Have you ever
But that's
found similar prints online or anything that people have displayed on their channel?
exactly.
Yeah.
I've found some online, and I've seen some on some like TV shows that were dead ringers for it. I mean, just identical, and especially in episodes where they show the deep south, like in Florida and the Everglades area. There's been some that I'm sure were the same family or same creature, I should say, maybe not family, but
Same genetic mutation or whatever you want to call it. What didn't they talk
exactly.
about that on Boggy Creek? The Boggy Creek
Yeah,
movie, a three-toed creature. Yeah.
yeah. There you go. That's exactly right. So I mean, this is not a new thing. I think it's probably one of those kind of situations where once the mutations start and that for where they first start, and then there's more breeding with the same mutation, that mutation becomes almost like a standard that the following generations of that mutated creature probably become the norm for his bloodline. It's just like humans, they have a genetic defect that carries on from generation to generation. And it's not typical of their species, but it's maybe typical of that of that chain or that particular family. And I think that gets passed on, and the more populations get thinned out and things become harder and food sources go away, they probably have a more chance. Your probability of getting a three-toed creature over a five-toed creature is greater in situations like that, probably.
Yeah, I've heard people mention that seems like they have Down syndrome or something. I don't know if that's true, but I'm just
Well,
thinking outside the
we didn't
box.
see it.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did not see it. I can't swear to a sighting because, like I said, everything I may not have a real elaborate story to tell you, but I'm being honest. All of it's the truth, and we never saw it. We heard it and saw the footprints and saw it. Now, I will tell you this. Um, I went for a good number of years, didn't see it, didn't hear no more about it, didn't think no more about it. And I got older, of course, and when I got older, and I married when I was 29, I think, and was married 5 years, and went through a divorce, and not a good time in my life, and it was a hard time. And one of the places that I go to during that time to kind of get my head together, and get my thoughts together, because it was when you get out there where this is at, especially whatever season, the time of the seasons you go, it's the most remote, desolate, quiet place you can even think about getting. You can get yourself removed from the lights and the cars and the sounds, and you wouldn't believe there was such a place like that in existence on the East Coast anymore, but it's within driving distance, but it is. So I drove out there one night and during that time, and didn't even have that on my mind. But I went out there, and got out. It was a cool night. It was in the early fall. It was a cool night, and I got out and I decided to go sit on the dock and just kind of gather my thoughts a little bit. And I was sitting there, and I was the only car out there, only no activity. You could sit on that dock, and at certain times of night, you may not see a car come down that road. The only single road that goes through there, you may not see a car come by there maybe every 25, 30, 45 minutes, maybe as much as an hour before a car come by. That's how I remember, how desolate it is. No homes at all for a good 7 or 8 mile stretch. And I was sitting there, and and I heard a tree knock, and then the tree knock was the distinct tree knock. By this time, I had seen enough on TV and stuff. I knew, hey, that might be a tree knock. So it piqued my interest. I got up and I walked around. I looked for a stick or something. I found a big stick, and there's a sign that's there that has a like a wildlife sign, North Carolina wildlife sign. It has all the regulations and rules on it and such, right there beside the dock. And I found a big stick, and I said, I'm just gonna hit this side of this pole and with this stick and see what happens. And did it, hit it 3 times, and it wasn't 10 seconds. I got 3 distinct knocks back, just perfect, just loud. And I thought, well, that's too weird not to be something to it. So I did it again, nothing. And I waited a few minutes and did it again, nothing. And after seeing the TV shows I've seen, I said, well, I'm gonna try one of these howls they talk about, this hoop and all this stuff. I'm just gonna see what I get. I did that, nothing. So I don't know. I think obviously those things, by me having that gap in my experience as a child till the time I was grown and married and divorced, and that's a good span of time, that shows there's a population in the area that it existed, that was still there. Um, um, I ain't gonna swear it's the same creature, but I mean it was definitely there's nothing in the woods that makes that kind of noise and has hands and digits that can take a stick and beat, and then certainly have enough intelligence to beat in response to you doing the same thing. So that had happened, like I said, that's been about 20, 21 years ago, 22 years ago now. That's when that happened. So, we put it somewhere around right after 2000, 2001.
Yeah, yeah, that is interesting. And what else happened after this?
Well, as far as Bigfoot, I mean, as far as the Bigfoot stuff, really not a lot more happened in that area. Because I'll be honest with you, the older I got, my dad got older and he got to where he was not fishing anymore. He kind of gave it up and was going into retirement and just kind of was taking life easy. And I'm surprised when he got older, he just didn't fish like he did when he was younger, but kind of gave up, got burnt out on the fishing. And so I didn't go through that. And I got a son. He's now 27 years old, and I was spending a lot of time with him. And he just was not, my boy is not much into fishing. I tried to get him into it, but he just don't care anything about it. But so we didn't really go out into that area much, but he did like to camp. So I'd take him camping up in Montgomery County. Now, Montgomery County, a lot of people are going to know that name because Montgomery County is home of the Uaris, the Uari mountain chain. And the Uari chain it has been on finding Bigfoot. It's been on that on that because it has a long history of reported Bigfoot sightings. The Uari chain is an ancient volcanic range that none of the peaks hardly exceed 1,000 feet, but they're real pronounced and they're real hilly. They look a lot bigger than they really are because of the rise in elevation. It's so sharp right there, and there's a lot of outdoor activities. Well, I was up there, and my son was not with me that night, but I was up there camping out, and I can't think of the name of the camp, but it's off Highway 109 West, going back toward the river. And I'm sure somebody figured that out, but I cannot think of the name of it to save my life at the moment. But it's a rural, what they call primitive campsite. It has no picnic tables, nothing. Um, I think it did have a porta potty type thing. That was it, but no hookups or power and all that. You go out there, you pretty much have to bring it all in. I was out there one night and I was camped out, and the last thing in the world in my mind was Bigfoot, of course. I mean, that been so many years since I even had any experiences, not in that county either. But I was out there and I was cooking out some hot dogs and some things, and I said, I'm getting tired. I thought to myself, man, I'm about wore out. I'm gonna go to bed. So I doused the fire out, and I had about 5 or 6 hot dogs left over and some beanie weenies, I think. And I threw them in the tree line, which was only 20 feet away from the tent. And the hill went steep down below me on there, and I threw it all at the edge of the tree line. And I got in the tent and zipped up and was getting ready for bed. I laid down. I turned out the light and laid down, and all of a sudden I heard footfall, but it was really, really loud footfall. And I now, let me tell you, I camped out enough back then, hiked enough trails that I was very alert, observant of any sound around me, and I got to where I could tell if really got. I'm not trying to brag here, but I got to where I could tell by the weight and displacement and sound if it was a small animal, a large animal, or a 4-footed animal, or a human. I got to where I could really guess it pretty good. And I never heard this before. And it was 2 feet, walking on 2 feet, and it was it loud. It had a heavier footfall, a lot heavier than a human. And where it was coming from, the tree line was so thick and hilly, steep that I couldn't imagine a human being out there at 11, 12 o'clock at midnight. Couldn't be walking around out there like that. I thought they got to be foolish. And but it kind of spooked me. I got to thinking, well, somebody could be coming up on me, And I listened and I listened, and it got a little closer, and never made any hollers or sounds or hoops or anything like that. But just it would stop, and then it would start. And I think it smelled that food the whole time that I was cooking, and that's what it came in for. That smell brought it in, because in the past I'd had raccoons and bobcats and deer. I had all kinds of animals come up where the smell would bring them in at night. Some of them would come up in plain view, like especially raccoons. A lot of times, like deer and things like that, even bobcats, they'd wait till you go to bed. They would come up, and kind of check your camp out a little bit. But this, excuse me, this thing was different. It was smart, and it never came out into view. Well, my birthday had only been like a couple of weeks prior to that, and my son had got me a 100,000 candle watt uh, light you plug into your cigarette lighter, and it was like LED, and it was really bright. So I said, I'm gonna get out the tent, and I'm gonna go get that thing, and I'm gonna shine the light down there. And I did. I got the light and shined all down, lit the whole woods up. Never saw nothing. Never nothing. And it was quiet. So finally I felt like that was a mute. So I put it back up and got back in the tent. Well, I'd only been in the tent for maybe 5 minutes, and here it come again. Just just, and you could hear one foot falling the next, and then you could hear loud limbs cracking and everything else, just loud. Then all of a sudden I could hear the heavy breathing. It was just like that. And I thought, okay, if somebody lost a cow or something, there was no farms around there, and there was so much hill land. I thought there's no farms that I know of around here, but trying to put in my mind what kind of an animal could do that. And it's, burying coming to my mind, but then it didn't have the footfall like it would be a 4-footed animal. Well, anyway, I wasn't nothing I could do, and I decided to stay in the tent and just ride it out. And it lasted for about 20 minutes, and I heard it like breaking some sticks, and I knew about where I threw that food at in the woods. So the next morning I got out at daylight, and I got my flashlight, and it was still, the sun was coming up, and I looked, and I never could find any of the food I threw. I didn't find not a single hot dog, anything. It was all gone. And so I decided to walk in that direction to see, where what was there. And when I got to looking and investigating it, I could find it. Now, bear in mind, this ground is rock, red clay, hard, and I mean it's thick forest. But I walked where as much as I could, and I saw where something had broken its path through there and made it a path. It had gone through there. It was only about, I would say, 40 feet from, or 25 to 40 feet from my camp. In the tree line, had just broke. I mean, it made a clear, distinct path, and it broke limbs, 2 and 3 inch saplings up as high as 7, 8 feet high. It just snapped them off like they were nothing. And that's what I heard during the night. All those trees snapping. So whatever this thing was, had to be either massive to do that, and up higher than I am. I'm 6 foot, even right around 6 foot, and it had to be as tall as I was, and to reach those limbs at that height, it had to have, I would say, arms to be able to be articulate enough to grab them and break them. So I looked for hair and I looked for footprints, and the only thing I ever saw for as far as footprints, because the ground being so full of leaf clutter and so hard, I could see where something had like slid its foot and kind of slid across the thing and raked the wet leaves with its feet. But I never could find a footprint. And what soil conditions just weren't like they were when I was had those experiences down in the county below, because it was just that was in just red clay. But so that was really, I would say, the only other time that I've had an experience that with what I would deem to be a possible Bigfoot.
Okay, I appreciate you for sharing that as well. Now, is this close to Raleigh or Pisgah? I'm not really familiar with the area. I've been to North
No,
Carolina before, but just a few
yeah, yes,
times.
sir. No. This is, if you're familiar with North Carolina, this is we're 90 miles southwest of Raleigh, and about 75 miles east of Charlotte. And we're on what they call the south central portion of the state.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so we're between the coast
Mm.
and the mountains. We're in where this all happened is all in the Piedmont. It's in the eastern Piedmont, southeastern Piedmont, and you have the coastal plains, and then you have the sand hills, and you have that area. Then it grades into the Piedmont, and then it grades into the western Piedmont, the foothills, and it goes to the mountains. But we're in south central North Carolina.
Oh, okay. And I've been to like Marion, Wiseman's Peak, Linville Falls, and that was a beautiful area. I really had a lot of fun, and it just seemed like a squatchy area. I
It
saw
is.
I saw the orbs or the lights off of Wiseman's Peak. You can see like these
Mm-hmm.
lights down in the gorge, down by the
Yep.
river, and they'd light up and then go out, and then they'd light up in different areas. And it almost seemed like there was
Cool.
people camping down there, but in some of these areas, it's like there's nobody camping on a cliff.
I think you may be describing um oh, what do you call it? The Brown Mountain Lights.
Yeah, the Brown Mountain Lights. I don't know if that's the same area as Wiseman's Peak. Um,
That's in that area. Wiseman's Overlook and everything. Yeah. Yep,
yeah,
that's it.
yeah, that's a really
Y-
cool, magical area for sure. And whenever I was,
That's one area that I would love to see, and I've never seen them. Me and my father took 3 trips up there to see the Brown Mountain Lights and never saw them.
oh really? I guess I got
Yeah,
lucky. Um,
you
I
got very lucky.
I filmed them, but I didn't have a tripod, and I was holding my camera, and it's a little shaky, but I got them on film. I need to put it up on the channel. I'm just not sure if I'm gonna do that yet, just because the person I went up there with, I don't know if we're on good terms.
Yeah, I you got very lucky, because I've had other friends that's gone up there and never seen it, and they are kind of hit and miss. There's been a lot of theory about them. What kind of are they, ghost lights, paranormal, or they're natural? And I've thought about them a lot. I've thought about them, and I've got a geological background. I'm big into minerals and gold panning and all that kind of thing, and got geological maps and stuff. And I've thought about that hard about what that. And you have a lot of faulting. You have what they call the Brevard Fault Zone that runs through that area, and North Carolina is dissected by several faults. Most of them are inactive, or what they call slip faults, that are just basically dormant faults. There's no uplift on them. There's nothing pushing. They're just like basement sediment rocks that keep settling, and every so often you get movement. It's almost like a house settling, and they will transfer energy along that fault. But they also, what they'll do is where certain areas where they have a high density of quartz, they'll which quartz is piezoelectric. It'll give off a discharge of energy um, when it's rubbed or vibrated or whatever. It will give off a certain amount of energy, and that energy, that piezoelectricity, will rise up. And they say if the atmospheric conditions are just right, it's very possible that that ball of discharge of energy may actually ionize the air above it and cause some of these lights. Now, I think that sounds like a good theory to me. That's There's other areas in the world where those same lights occur, and they have documented and traced it back to fault lines. And that would be explain a lot of why there's no rhyme or reason or pattern to the frequency of them too, as far as when they're going to occur and all that, because it's, you can't control when something like nature like that does that. And people said swamp gas over the years, but it's not a swampy area. It's some mountainous terrain. There's not really swamps in the area. That's all mountains.
Yeah.
So there couldn't be any kind of swamp gas or anything being created up in that area.
Right.
And as far as paranormal ghosts, there's legends about maidens and Indian chiefs and all that, and all this stuff, and always folklore around that people say, well, that's the ghost of a lost maiden or something like that was killed. But I don't know. It could be, but I'm just saying. I really think it goes back for so long. I really think it's geologic in origin. I don't think that's a paranormal one. It may be, but I don't think it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I personally think it's paranormal, but what you described makes sense as well. And I don't know, they say the paranormal thrives off of energy, so maybe the natural occurrence that's taking place could allow the paranormal to manifest.
Hey, it could be both. It may be like you said. It may be one's triggering the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. What else have you experienced with Bigfoot?
Really, not a lot. That's it. That's really. I don't want to say anything else. I've been in the woods a lot in my life, and I've heard a lot of sounds, heard a lot of noises. The only other thing I could even remotely contribute to possibly being something like that was actually not very long ago, and it was in that general vicinity where I had my first sightings when I was as a boy. Um, my girlfriend at the time, she she was big into aquariums and all that. And she wanted to have some really pretty rocks to put in the aquarium, and I said, well, she said, I know you know about rocks, so I said, yeah, right up in that area, there's some river agates that are on an old floodplain that's exposed, uplift that's exposed, and they've got these really pretty agates with all kinds of colors in them and patterns and everything. I said they're right beside the road and a bed and a gravel bed. I said we can go there and pick them up. You'll love them. So we went up there with our bucket one evening and parked up on the hill and went across the road and couldn't park on the same side that the gravel was on because there wasn't enough pull off area, but there was on the other side. We got over there and we could walk. We were within eyesight of the truck, but we got up there and we got on the little embankment and we started finding all these pieces of agate, and she was having a ball, and something in the tree line started growling, but it wasn't like what I'd heard. It was more of a growl, more like an animal growl, and but it never showed itself, and it started shaking. There was like, I would say, 30, 40 foot. These were fairly new growth pines. They weren't, that area had been logged some years ago, but they were still 30 or 40 feet high, but they were not like monster pines. And it was actually, it was not a windy day, but whatever it was shaking those pine trees back and forth, and they were just whipping back and forth violently. And it's like one tree, it was, then there'll be another tree. It was not like the whole tree, like a wind burst. And uh and she was getting panicky and said, oh, I'm gonna go back to the truck, I'm gonna go back to her. I said, just wait here just a minute. She said, what if whatever it is comes out? I said, I just wait here just a minute. And we stood there, and it would growl, and the tree would shake, but we never would see it because, like I said, you got to bear in mind these woods they're thick. I mean, they're thick, and even in the daytime, there's some places you can't see 2 feet on the other side of what's in the tree line. It's that thick. And anyway, we stood there for a few minutes, and it let out a really deep, threatening growl. And I looked back to tell her, let's run. And she'd already took off. I heard the bucket drop and the rocks fall out. And I had never seen her move that fast. She went across the road, jumped the embankment, was in the truck, and I heard the truck door slam before I even got my turned around. So I wanted to stay there a few minutes, but it really kind of scared me. I really don't know what it was. It was aggressive, and it sounded like it really didn't want me there. So I hightailed it back to the truck, and we sat in the truck, the safety of the truck. We sat in the truck with the key in the ignition in case whatever was come out, and we had to leave fast, but it never came out. And so that I don't know. That was really the last time anything happened together. That was the last time. And now that area was in an area they call Covington's Hill. That's only about 5 miles east of where at Mount Creek where that happened when I was a child. So the whole area has got a history of it. Like I said, I think there was even a site off of what they call Highway 73, which runs to the north of there some undisclosed place back some years ago, about a man he actually saw one come out of the woods while he was fishing on the bank. And I've heard stories just around town and at bait and tackle shops and everything. I've heard stories. People would come up and say, I don't know what that was last night, but something come in there and just hollering and screaming, and we had to get out of there and that kind of thing. So It's got an area, it's got a history, and it's not a recent history. It goes back some years ago. There's actually a cave off of up near Mountain Creek up in that area somewhere. I never found it. I tried and I tried. That reportedly Daniel Boone is supposed to have stayed at. That's the legend around here. That was Daniel Boone's cave. They actually call it, and they say it's not a huge cave, but it's a cave you can get up in. You can crawl in. So the area is not really a conducive of the geology that produces caves. But I don't know. This was just like I say, there's a slate. There's a lot of natural slate in this area, and I guess there was some kind of a blowout through there, and there was an area big enough in the between the cleavages of the slate for a cave like to form. But yeah, that's that really the only other time that I've ever had an experience. Now that was only a few years back. So I do think that these creatures are migratory. They come up and they travel that river valley because it is so remote and desolate, and it's about the only remote and desolate area, if you're familiar with North Carolina, between Charlotte and the coast, Wilmington and Fayetteville, which is a big military town. It's the only, and you travel that river valley up that, and you go all the way through Montgomery County up through Uwharries, and you start getting to what they call the Triad area, which is I-85 and that corridor. That's a huge amount of growth. So that area right through here is really kind of probably the only safe haven an animal like that would have, and to evade detection. To be honest.
Yeah, there's a lot of forest around there. And I don't want to be the guy that says that was Bigfoot, but being that there has been reports from the area, you've had experiences really close to there, that's probably what it was.
Yeah, yeah, I really do believe that. And if you'll if you like I say your listeners and all that would just like Google and look through North Carolina Bigfoot, I can go to some of their websites and different things. You'll eventually come across stories, you'll come across articles and even TV shows that mention this area. And some years ago, there's a little town east of here called Bladenboro. Now that's fairly east of here, but there used to be what they called it was a big cat, a wampus cat or whatever. It was a big, huge black cat that was killing animals down there back in the '60s. And that's not a that's a story anybody could look up. The Beast of Bladenboro was the name of it. Well, that big black cat that they talked about is what I think was they call a catamount. It was a black panther. It's like almost extinct subspecies, very dark subspecies of cougar, and it might even be a panther, but it's a big black cat, eastern cat, and they are for the most part extinct. But but we actually saw one of those near my father's house on the power line cut over, and one night over there, and it was a massive cat, and it had actually attacked and killed a calf in a man's field, and a lot of times they say in Bigfoot circles that big cat sightings kind of go along and coincide with Bigfoot reports. And I mean, that's what I've always heard, that a lot of times where there's Bigfoot reports, there's also big cat reports. And there are some big cats in that area, big black cats.
Yeah, they're probably still around in the area just because of
Oh
their
yeah,
keen senses and they're able to avoid human detection just like the cryptids. So, I mean, it makes sense that if a creature like that can live in that area of the state, so can Bigfoot.
oh yeah, yeah. And like I said, I think they're migratory. I don't think there's a living population of them, a breeding population a population of them in the area. As remote as it is, as wild as it is, it's still in central North Carolina, in the middle of a lot of other developed areas, highly commercialized areas like Charlotte and Raleigh and Fayetteville. So it's like a haven in the middle of all that. But when you think about an animal that size of any breeding population, then they would need a large amount of area for growing and for privacy. And there are hunters. There are hunters and there are outdoor recreational enthusiasts. There's people that eventually might flush one of them out or catch them on a trail camera or something like that. Um, and not all of that whole area is national forest. Now, Uwharrie National Forest is, but I think it's like 50 or 60,000 acres or something like that. Pretty small standards, most standards. But you really don't get over into that, like, you're talking hundreds of thousands of acres until you get to western North Carolina, back toward the Great Smokies and the Pisgah National Forest and all that area up there. And not only that, you got the highest peak east of the Mississippi over there, Mount Mitchell, and you've got a lot of gorges, a lot of deep valleys of the rock system over there is such where there's a lot more caves. I've got a friend, she sent me photographs, um, and I still have them digitally. She sent me photographs. She grew up in a little town just south of Asheville. I can't think of the name of the town, but anyway, it's up in that area up there, just on the outskirts of the Great Smokies. It's her. Matter of fact, her property bordered part of the Great Smokies. They had to sell a few years ago because of taxes and all that, different things, and I think some deaths in the family. They had to sell some of the land, and that area is growing up, and a lot of rich people from up north and are buying up land left and right out there and wanting to put, summer cottages out there and so that kind of thing. But they retained about 40 acres on the side of a mountain, everything on the side of a mountain. But her and her daughter went up there one night and one evening to go get away and to spend some time together, and it was in the wintertime, and she said growing up as a child up there, her daddy would tell her not to go out into the woods because the boojum might get her. They called them, and that's an old mountain Appalachian theory that they call it the boojum, that it was a Bigfoot-like creature that had attraction toward women and was a wild man. And she said she remembered as a child hearing the hoops and the hollers and all that, but never thought much about it. But her daddy always told her, "Don't you go out at night. Don't go out in the woods at night. You stay close to the house." She never thought much of it. But she was up there with her daughter one night, and her daughter's grown too, but she's grown. She's this is her daughter's drivable and all that stuff. But anyway, they were just trying to spend some time to get away and have a little bit of time to get caught up, and during the night, snowfall came, and it was a really immense fall, about 8 inches, which overnight is pretty good for that area, that part of the southern Appalachians. And when they went out the next morning, there were footprints, big footprints. They each had 5 toes, but they were big. They were like, she sent me a picture with her foot beside one of the footprints, and the footprints were double her size and then some. They were big and they were wide and they were distinct. One footprint was a left foot and the other was a right foot, and they had about a 6 foot stride between them. Well, they come up off the side of this mountain driveway, went up through the driveway, went by her truck, went right by the window in her house, circled around the house, and then went up the side of the hill back up the tree line. And her and her daughter decided to see where it went. And I mean, this girl, she's tough. She knows her stuff, and she grew up in the country, so she's not afraid of much. And she went up and followed them as far as she could follow, and it was getting kind of late in the evening, and it was getting slick, and the weather was getting worse, so she just abandoned the idea. And they never did see what it went. This thing, whatever it was, went on up the cliff, clear over the mountain, and you're talking 20-something degree temperatures. I don't know what else could do that. I mean, really, what else could size a creature, a Bigfoot? What could walk around barefoot in 20-something degree temperatures, have 6 foot stride and 18-inch footprints, and walk through it barefooted at night? People skeptics can say what they want to, but I've seen too much and heard too many things and know too many credible people, good credible people to know there's something to it.
Yeah, and you have spoken with people in the area that have had encounters themselves.
Oh God, yeah, several right here in my area. Like I said, this lady has photographs because this happened not that many years ago. She had a cell phone and she took footprints. She took the pictures of them, sent me the pictures, and yeah, it's something. I don't know what it is. It's not a person in snowshoes. These are feet. These are feet with toes that walking in 8 inch thick snow. Yeah. And I've heard stories, many over the years. I've heard stories right in this area from hunters and stuff that would tell me about things coming up on them at night and hooping and hollering, and I've had one even told me one time he had rocks thrown at him. He didn't know what it was, and he said something was throwing rocks at him on his hunting property, and he said I'd be up there hunting at night in my deer stand, and I'd get kind of spooked and get kind of quiet, and he said something sounded like something's come up on me, something's the whole atmosphere's changed, and he said next thing I know a rock would hit the side of the stand, and he said I would think I've got squatters or somebody pulling somebody in the club, pulling a joke on me. Nobody would know. He would ask about it, and then the next day or so, and nobody would even be on there. So what other animal? What other animal is intelligent enough and has hands that can pick up a rock and throw it at somebody? And it's too much evidence. It's got to be something.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so moving on to your next encounters, you mentioned that you possibly seen some UFOs, some other paranormal activity. Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Bear with me. I'm sitting outside here on the porch, and there's a car coming by. It's really loud. But anyway, yeah. The next thing I can tell you about, and bear in mind, the only reason I've seen any of this, Miguel, the only reason I credit myself to having any of these encounters is not because of anything special about me, or I've got a desire to see it. It's just I spent so much of my life outdoors and being out in quiet areas, away from public and all that stuff, just to, because I like the outdoors. And I think anybody that puts himself in that situation outdoors, they're going to see things because there is a lot unknown out there. But we had back in the early 80s, there again, this happened out there at my father's house, which that area was very, very remote. And you could get out there and you wouldn't see street lights. There was no street lights. You didn't see city lights. You didn't see cars and things. So it was dark out there. It was dark. You saw all the stars in the sky at night, and it was a perfect place to get away. And my dad, working that swing shift, he started seeing lights in the sky. He was telling me about all the stuff he would see coming home at night. And then the first night I spent out there with him, I didn't live with him. My father lived out there. I lived with my grandparents in town, about 10, 15 miles away. But anyway, he would take me out there and I'd spend weekends with him and things. And sure enough, we started seeing a lot of lights, and just weird lights, blue lights, orange lights, white lights, and they would dart extremely fast across the sky and that kind of thing. And but the first time we had a real daytime experience where we were coming back from where I lived with my grandparents, and this was in the daytime. I don't remember what time, but it was after school during the weekday. I think it was on a Friday. And we turned the corner off of the main road that goes to that 2-lane road that goes up to his house, about 11, 12 miles from his house. And right after we turned off, there was cars parked in the road. They were in the highway, and people were standing outside the road, outside their car, looking up. And my dad said, "What in the world? Must have been a wreck up here or something, And we looked, and everybody was staring up. So we looked out the window. Excuse me. And there was a silver craft. There was a silver saucer. Just guessing it, I'd say it was probably 40 to 60, 75 feet in diameter. That's what it looked like. May have been larger, but it was over the trees about 300, 400 feet. Made no sound, and it was circular. Had 3 black pods or discs on the bottom, like this pods. I don't know what they were. They were like pads or whatever. And it came up like a dome. And then on top of that dome was another dome on top of that. It was smaller. Now the larger dome on the bottom had portholes, little like windows all the way around it, around the peripheral of it. And it had a little antenna on top of it. Just classic UFO. And I didn't know at the time much, anything about it again. And I actually, looking through books and articles and things, I did actually see some photographs people had taken of the almost exact same thing in different places across the country. But anyway, we watched this thing for a few minutes, and as it hovered. And I will say the weird thing about it was when it was there, I think everybody was such awe of it that nobody communicated. It was like everybody was like frozen. It was just like, you were fixed to it and couldn't even put a thought together other than just stand there and stare. And it was almost like a weird electric feel in the air. You just like a plasma. It was just a feel that like your hair on your head was standing up. And then the next thing we know, this it was like a flash, and it just went off up in the air, straight up, at such a speed that there's no way in the world, if it were conventional of any source, from a dead stop vertically, that it wouldn't have broke the sound barrier, and you would have heard a snap or a loud sound. But there was nothing, and it was almost like you were in a trance staring at this thing. And this was again before the advent of cell phones, so nobody had a camera. Excuse me, say. So nobody had a camera, and after it left, my dad looked at this guy standing there beside his truck. He said, "What in the world is that?" The guy said, "I ain't never seen nothing like that." And of course, everybody knows the old lady. She was coming in the other direction. She said the same thing. She said, "Have you ever seen anything like that?" And I said, "No." And anyway, we kind of all got in our vehicle and went our separate ways. Well, we were dumbfounded by it and confused and didn't know what to think, like anybody else would be. Well, as time went on, the following weeks and months, we started seeing almost on a nightly basis. We never saw another daytime sighting, but we would see weird lights, all kinds of weird lights, and just hovering in the skies. And excuse me. And we were coming back. My father and I, and we had a buddy of mine stayed with me that night. We were coming back to Rockingham. He had to be home the next morning because it was school night. Well, I did too. But anyway, we were coming back, and on our west side, back looking toward the river, he was on the outside on the wind side. He said, his name was Mike as well, by the way, but he said, Mr. Mike, he said, look out the window. And there was a diamond shape. It was an orange, shaped like a diamond, but it was orange, sitting over the trees, sitting up in the sky at a very low angle. And it just almost like the light that was coming off of it was like plasma almost. I don't know how to say, almost like when you look at the top of an engine, of a hood in the summertime, or the top of the ground, you see how the heat coming off. That's how it kind of looked. So we pulled over, got out of the truck, stood there and looked and watched it for a few minutes, and it was safe enough away. We felt safer to do that, and no sound. And it was just kind of floating there in midair. And about that time we could hear helicopters. Well, the helicopters come from the east, which would have been back toward Fort Bragg. Excuse me. Because Bragg is to our east. And but it's, I would say, probably 50 miles to our east, But now it has been known that the military would come up in this area because of the remoteness of it, and do night maneuvers and send people out to do, troops to go some of the river valleys and do campments and all that. And there was actually a military plane that crashed one time up in on the river, and they had to take it and get it barged off and not let people in so they could recover the plane. But anyway, this particular night, these helicopters started coming in, and when they come in, they engulfed the craft all the way around it. They went all the way around this craft, and whatever it was, I think must have been military. I don't know. If it wasn't, I don't know what we would have had at that time that could have done this. But after the helicopters came, the helicopters and this thing went off to the east and drifted away. So that was the only time I had a connection between helicopters and whatever this thing was. The other, we never saw helicopters again. Excuse me. And but we would see like all kinds of lights. I don't even know how to describe them. They were just all at such frequency. And my dad was coming home one night. I wasn't with him. There was a large field across the road from his house. The man he actually rented his house from had a field and raised cattle. And the next day, well, that night, let me get ahead of myself. He was turning in his driveway, and he saw a blue light coming from the sky, coming down into the tree line above the pasture. So he got out of his truck and sat there on the back on his tailgate a minute and watched it. And he said it came down and it went into the tree line and it went out. And he said, but he said he could see what looked like arcing, almost like a welder's arc, lights flashing through the trees. And he watched it for a few minutes, and finally it lifted up and went off at a fairly slow speed back to the west. He went on in the house, didn't think no more of it. Well, the next day or two later, the owner of that field came up to my father, knowing my dad worked swing shifts late and was one of the only few to be on the road that night in that area. He come up to him and he said, "Did you see any activity over there on my property last couple of nights?" He said, "No." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well," he said, "I came out there in the field and I've got a couple of cows dead." And he said, "The cows, one of them's nothing on him, but the other one's laying there and it's like somebody took a hot knife or something and cauterized the wound when it did it and cut the thing's tongue out." And he said, and its eyes were blackened out like something like a hot poker had poked in the eyes. And he said, "But I've got 2 dead cattle over there." And he said something, and that was big business with this guy because he raised cattle and that was expensive. And he had some pretty expensive cows in there. He was real, particular about that. And anybody shooting or poaching, he didn't play with that. So that hit him pretty hard financially. And my dad told him about the blue light. And here again, we're scratching our head. But see, back at that time, here again, we were innocent, didn't know it. And there wasn't a lot of media about it at the time to talk about it. But we've since heard about cattle mutilations. And this was back in the 80s. So it's very possible that was a very early cattle mutilation before we even knew what that meant. Now, why anything would have a reason to go kill cows in somebody's field, I don't know. But two cows were killed mysteriously in that field. And I will throw this in there, Miguel. That area is a very mysterious area. Um, um, in that field, the same field, on the southern end of that field, right along the tree line before it gets to the creek, is a pyramid. My dad told me I didn't really get to see it that good other than picture, but my dad saw it. The farmer that had that used to plow that lower end of the field and planted something on there for the cows. He hit with his plow blade. He hit a rock. He thought, and which there wasn't a lot of rock in that field, but he went digging around there and found the top cap part of a four-sided pyramid shaped object. Well, he got to thinking it may have been part of being along the creek down there. It might have been part of an old cemetery or something, some kind of a headstone for a cemetery or that kind of thing. So he dug around a little bit, and he dug and he dug. Well, eventually he got down almost 12 feet. And as he got deeper and deeper and deeper, this thing got wider and wider and wider. So he was just seeing the top part of whatever this thing was. And excuse me. And there was the rock that he said it was carved out. It was not indigenous to the area. It was not slate or anything. It was some kind of a stone that wasn't. He said it wasn't the period he'd ever seen. And he you had to know this guy. He was an old guy that just didn't. He didn't. If it wasn't cattle, it wasn't farming or chewing tobacco, he didn't care. He was curious, but not enough to go anywhere with it. And he didn't want publicity. He didn't want anybody to talk about it. He didn't want no activity, nobody on his land unless he knew you really good. And he was just quiet, reserved man. So he covered it back up. He covered all of it back up, seeded it, and forgot all about it. And I remember that story, and that was in the same field where the cattle mutilations occurred. And I never put two and two together, but I always will wonder if that had something to do with that. And some years later, I worked in a textile for a while before I got into the profession I'm in now. But I worked in textile for a while before I finally found out what I really wanted to do and got into another line of work that wasn't losing jobs left and right. But I worked with a fellow who was a fixer on a line on a second shift department. And he told me, he said he knew I was into rocks, and he said, everything you ever, he said, you want to go see a mucky rock? And I said, mucky rock? You talking about? He said, behind my grandmother's house is a mucky rock. He said, everybody in the area knew about it for years. He said it was a solid piece of granite, which now granite is indigenous over that area. There's a pile of granite along that western edge of the river over there. And it's even mined over there, but there is outcroppings of huge, massive boulders of granite that occur naturally all over that area. But anyway, he said there's a rock over there that's been stood upright. It's about 14 foot high. It's like an effigy. It's got two ears. It's got a snout, a grunting looking face and gritting teeth and deep inset eyes. I said, man, yeah, I got to see this. So it was in the summertime. So we went over there, and he said, now be prepared. There's a lot of briars, and we had our bug spray because in the deep south, you don't go anywhere without tick spray. But we went over there and followed the creek, and had to crawl on our hands and knees and crawl under briars, and it was a heck of a trip getting in there. But we finally got into it and went up the hill, and there it was. It was underneath a lot of canopy, like briars and stuff that you couldn't from underneath. You couldn't even hardly see. You couldn't see if you were flying above it. You couldn't see it because it was like a jungle back in there. It had grown over it. But there it was. It was here again for the advent of cell phones being popular. Had no way to really do anything, but I did take a little 110 pocket camera that you had to process the film with, but I didn't have a flash on it, and I wasn't expecting it to be so dark back in there. But it was actually fairly dark even in the daytime, so the pictures didn't come out worth the hoot. But we took a picture of it, and it was amazing. I don't know, and the closest thing I've seen to it from any research I've done is it's Mayan. The Mayan, I think don't quote me on this, either Mayan or Aztec, but they came up through Central America and through Texas and traveled up the southeast and colonized some areas. I don't know if they were here on what they were here for in this area, maybe exploration parties, but they preceded the Spanish and certainly the whites and the American colonization, English, long before. And I've heard even since then that there's a place down in Georgia, I believe it is, where there is actually a Mayan culture. Creek Indian site where they think the Creek Indians may have been influenced by these Mayans. That's what spurred them to build mounds, earthen mounds, to simulate the stone mounds that the Mayans built, and that's where they got that idea from. So, and there are Indian Creek Indian villages all up and down, even from in this area, right in here. What I'm telling you about, that Creek Indians have, encampments in that area, and there's historical areas they've been well known about. So, but I do think that the Creek, one thing the Creek Indians didn't do, what appears they didn't do, is they didn't carve stone effigies like that. Certainly not one out in the middle of nowhere where there's no other evidence like that existing. But that happened some years later, and I saw the monkey stone, and then I thought back about the pyramid. That was about 4 miles to the northeast of there, and the pyramid that lied in that farmer's field. And I've always wondered if there weren't a connection. There weren't some kind of connection there, that maybe there were long before any, English settlers, even before Native Americans, were here. That the Mayans, well, I think the Native Americans here, but the Mayans had an influence on the culture here, and that's amazed me ever since. And when I saw that, and so, but all that kind of ties into this whole area being mysterious. I don't know how else to put it. It's that, as far as getting back to the UFOs, that time the local newspapers were even writing about it. There'd be articles almost every other day about more weird lights seen in the skies, county on alert, and that kind of thing. And there was a writer. He's been long deceased, but he I knew him. He lived in that area, and he was coming home from a little league baseball game one night, and he saw an orange light coming down out of the sky, going and landing in a field. Actually, landing in a field. So he decided, him being a writer for the newspaper, he had a camera on him. One of the few people back then had video, had some kind of a way to record this thing. He got out of the car, jumped this fence, and went into the field where he saw this thing go down. And his first thought was something's crashed, but there was no sound. So he got across the field, and he decided to walk across there, and he could see the light shining through the tree. But by the time he got to the other side of the field, it had come up, and it had come up out of the tree line. So he grabbed his camera and started to take some pictures. And he said, as quick as he could get the shutter on the thing to release and start snapping pictures, it just shot off, he said, at an ungodly rate of speed. And I think he actually got a few pictures, but they were almost like, if you would take a light and take a picture, and you get that blurring effect where it gets almost like a squiggly line look to it. He didn't really get a good definition, but he tried. But so there was a lot of stuff going on during that time. And that, I mean, if I told you every single light we saw during that time, it would, oh my God, it was almost on a nightly basis. But now the whole thing lasted for about 2 years, off and on for about 2 years. I'd say from about 1980 to 82. And I've since I've gotten older, I understand a little more, and I've read more. I think that's what they call a flap. It's when you have a large amount of concentrated sightings in one localized area. It's called a flap. The most famous flap I've heard of, is what they call Gulf Breeze down in Florida. The Gulf Breeze sightings, I think, happened back in the 80s, early 90s. And that was a well-documented flap, where a lot of credible people actually witnessed it and got a lot of video footage of that thing down there. But that area was more populated than this area. So I think there's the population, and the fact that people had more cameras and things, there, they were more able to get images of it. Whereas around here, a lot of people were just farmers and very rural country area, that the people just weren't prepared to see these things when it happened.
Yeah, that is interesting. Do you think it's somehow connected to the military bases? I know you mentioned Fort Bragg. Is that pretty close?
Fort Bragg is about 40 to 50 miles east of here. It's um, we being Bragg is such a big area. Yes, I would say anything's possible, and there's nothing down. Well, now down east of here, there's a lot of flat land, coastal plain land, but there's also a lot of population. But it's country, but there's a lot of places down there people live. When you get along this river valley in this part of the state, you literally can go 10 miles in one direction up there, and you do good to find one house. or one trailer or anything, and you may go on that road and travel for miles, and before you come across your first car. And at night, if you get stuck at night up there, you're stuck. You're walking because there's nobody going to be there to help you. And there's just not a lot of areas like that left anymore. And so I think that's what drew over the years has drawn the military to come into here and do maneuvers and do hold exercises. And but that, I'm gonna say this real quick. I don't, but that same creek I was telling you about where we had the Bigfoot sightings. Um, I was up there with a buddy of mine. He doesn't live in the area anymore, but I don't even fish that much. But the last time I actually went physically fishing, I went with him, and this has been several years back. We went up there one night. He likes to catfish, and there, you sit there at the dock and you throw your line out there, and sometimes you'll catch some pretty good catfish. But anyway, we're sitting there, and we heard talking, and we heard footsteps and saw lights coming through the woods. And I mean, like, we're the only car out there at this time, and we're like, what in the world? And by that time, here come two military guys with their full combat gear on and their guns and their camouflage, and they don't even bother us. They see us there, but they don't speak or nothing. And they get to the edge of the tree line and they pull out some kind of a box, and it has like reflectors, little parabolic reflectors that flip off the side, and they stake it into the ground, and they get some kind of thing and plug a wire into it. And I don't know if it's some kind of GPS system or what it was, but it was some kind of positioning system, satellite thing. I don't know. But they tinkered with that for a few minutes and stood there and smoked a cigarette, and then put it back in a box and a backpack. And then they walked into the woods again, and off they went. Never said a word to us. Um, Now that shows you that the military, which I've always known this, they've had a big activity for years in that area, because it's an area that they can send their men in and train. It probably simulates a lot of areas that we might potentially get ourselves into in other parts of the world. Remote areas like that. It's got swamp, it's got hills, it's got valleys, it's got terrain that would be challenging to anybody. And I believe me, it's got snakes, it's got things in there, it's got animals that can hurt you bad. And I wouldn't want to be in there in the areas they were at night without some protection. And these guys come out of the woods and went back into the woods. So yeah, there's a lot of military activity out there. There really is. And I do think that some of what has been seen out there as far as UFOs and lights probably are um, associated with military activity, indirectly and directly. I don't know. That's my theory. But I don't think all of it is. I don't think all of it is that. And it stands to reason to me that back in the 80s, if there was a UFO flap here, and let's just say hypothetically that those lights were not of this world, um, and they were frequently seen in this one area, and the military would have gotten interest, knowledge of it, they would have had interest in coming and flying over and being in this area, because that would have been a reason for national security, to be something penetrating our airspace and with frequency. So I don't know. Miguel, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. Who knows? I mean, but
Yeah, I've had a lot of UFO encounters around here, and I wonder if it's associated with the Bigfoot activity. But also, there's a military base about 50 miles west of here called Fort Leonard Wood, and they
mhm.
do a lot of training for the Army.
Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about. In areas like this, it's real remote. It does seem. I've never really, I've never even really thought about it to what you just said. But during that time, from the 1980s, 1979, 1980 to as long as 1983, there was a lot that went on in this area. And there still is, but not like there was. There was like a peak of it right then. And then there was UFO activity, there was Bigfoot activity, large cats seen with frequency. And I do wonder if, like you said, I wonder if all of it wasn't tied. Military activity tied together in some form.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for something that advanced and technological, I mean, they can do circles around the earth in a few minutes. So I think going 50 miles is like walking to our mailbox.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. Well, I'm not going to say that it stopped after the mid '80s. That it just stopped. It really didn't never stop. Now, one thing that did stop and did change is I got older, got into my 18, 19, 19, 20-year-old age where, like any boy, I got to where outdoors in the woods and being with my buddies fishing wasn't the priority that I had on it at one time. I wanted to go out and date and have, had a car by that time, and I wanted to drive and didn't hang out with dad like I did prior to that. And so I didn't spend as much time. So a lot of things probably went on I just didn't see because I wasn't there as much. But I did continue to hear stories from people that were, hey, we're still seeing lights. Not with the frequency that we were, but we're still seeing lights. And even to this day, I hear of Bigfoot reports. Even to this day, I hear people occasionally tell about hearing something or seeing something in the woods, along that stretch of road up there. And that's a good stretch of road that if you wanted to have a Bigfoot sighting or a UFO sighting, but if you want to have a Bigfoot sighting, travel that road. When you leave the highway there that cuts through the center part of the county and go to the other tip of the county, the western far as you can go on that one road, you don't hardly pass a single house for about 10 miles in one area. And if you get along those back roads over there, you really are liable to see anything. Yeah, I mean, certainly like bobcats or even a bear or something, but you're really liable to see anything. It would be a place if somebody wanted to go and just travel the back roads with a camera. I would encourage it because um, there's no telling. But you better be sure you got plenty of gas, and you better be sure you got a good cell phone that's got good works transmission. Because if you break down up there, you're going to be stuck. But it's that remote. But it would be a good area for somebody pursuing that kind of thing to have an occurrence, an incident, and have one of their own stories. That would be a good place to start. It really would.
Yeah, too bad nobody has a camera on hand when these things take place. They got like a cell phone, and all you see is like this little bright light. But if you're there in person,
Yeah.
you can see the whole thing, and it's completely different.
And you just hit on something there too that I never really thought about it that way. But people say, well, all this modern technology, they got a good camera, but you're right. What people don't realize when you don't expect to see this kind of thing, it happens suddenly and it's quick and it don't wait around. And by the time your camera gets focused on it, it's usually at night. By the time your camera gets a focus on it, um, it does. You look at the pixelation in a camera, most even the better ones, and you take a picture of the moon or something from a distance, it's going to look like almost like somebody holding a flashlight way off in the distance. I mean, it's it's hard to get a good quality image unless you're into that kind of thing. You've got the equipment with the telescopic lenses and all that set up to do that. Unless you're going out for that purpose, it's hard to get it. And when you go out for that purpose, unfortunately, it seems like that's when the people that don't find nothing is because they're out there looking for it, and that's when it don't happen. It happens to the old bloke like me that just happens to be going out there traveling one night to go fishing or something. He ain't out there for that kind of thing. He's just trying to have a little bit of relaxation and fish. And that's the last thing you're looking for, and the last thing you expect. And if you're like me, you got your phone in my pocket, and by the time I dig that phone out of my pocket, it's gone. You know.
Yeah, that's typically how it works, and it's too bad when these things happen, we're not ready. It's like you have to have your camera in hand, ready to go, almost like you know it's going to happen before it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Have you seen any other cryptids other than Bigfoot?
No, I can't claim that I have seen any cryptids that I can say were pure cryptids.
Mhm.
In the sense of a creature type and things. Um, the only thing I can say that
Have you seen a
I don't
shadow
want to talk.
person?
Yeah, okay, that's where I was headed. That
Mhm.
I will tell you this story, and then and this is documented. I had a paranormal um, group come into my house and do the documentation, and I did it partly for that reason because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. And I wanted to confirmation myself that what was going on was really there. And um, the house that I'm living in was built in the early 20s, and it's when I moved in here. When we first bought the house, it had sat idle for several years, and bought it from family that actually had it. It was an uncle, and he had passed away in the house actually, but the family that owned it sold it to me, and at the time I was needing a place to go, and I was getting out on my own. I got a pretty good deal on it, and they never really. ever talked about any paranormal activity or ever even thought about that, and I didn't hear nothing about that. Well, the house sat vacant for several years, and they lived out of town, and they were worried about somebody vandalizing it and all that kind of thing. And when somebody in the family said, "Hey, I need a place to stay, and I'm looking to buy a house," and they were glad to sell it to me. They worked with me greatly on that. It was a blessing to me. And so anyway, I come to the house and bought the house and come in here and started remodeling. And I could see signs where people had been in there, had gotten in and camped out on the floors and, just mostly local kids and things. Back then there were little gangs that like little kids that were like, just wild and all that wanted to get, wouldn't listen to, anyway, they were rumored to be roaming the area. And I think some of that was them. Well, anyway, when I was remodeling, there was a closet off the bedroom, and I opened the closet door, and there was a pinup picture of a girly magazine hanging on the wall in one of the closets on the right, on the left-hand side of the door. And I went to take it off the wall. And when I took it off the wall, um, there was a pentagram drawn on the wall, and it was in something red. Now I ain't gonna swear to it being blood. I don't know what it was, but it was red, and it was about a foot and a half in diameter, maybe a foot in diameter or something like that. And it was drawn on the wall. It's clearly a pentagram. And I think actually, if I remember correctly, it had 666 written below it. But anyway, my wife at the time, I told her, I said, come here and look at this. And she didn't like the idea, and I didn't either. So, but what do? I mean, you already bought the house and closed on it and everything. And, we took the paper down, the poster down, threw it away, and got some paint. And we painted over the walls, and it didn't bleed back through anything like that. It covered it up. And we didn't think any more of it. And so, that kind of confirmed the rumors that we had heard that some of these local thugs, kids around the neighborhood, wanting the devil, dabble in the devil worship and all that kind of thing. And it was rumored that some of them did, and did some things like, cruel things to animals and everything like that. And I didn't know any of them, thank God, but we'd heard the stories. So anyway, we moved into the house and everything was fine at first. Nothing, not a thing happened. But me and my ex, like any relationship that goes sour, we 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 argued at times and didn't see eye to eye and disagree. Now we look back on it and we're good friends, and we look back, why in the world did we act the way we did? We just young and not really matured up. Either one of us ready, and how things happen. But it's like things started happening during that time, like when the moments of emotions and things were prevailing, and negative thoughts were going through people. Say, it was like that influenced it almost and brought it out to the surface. The first thing that happened was one night we had gotten in an argument, and never will forget it. And she said some things, and I said some things, and she said, "Fine, you can go sleep on the couch." And I said, "Okay, that's what I'll do." So I went out the bedroom was a little heating hall. I had to go through another room, through the den, and then go into the living room. And so I went to the couch and got myself made up on the couch and was ready to go to bed, and just kind of laying there, just mad. And she was laying in the other part of the house mad. And I was laying there, and during the night, I don't know what time it was, but during the night, it felt like a dream at first, but it wasn't. I don't know how to describe it. I physically saw my body laying on the couch, just like I went to bed in the same position, everything I was laid on. I could see my body laying there. And it's like I had this tremendous fear that said, wake up, you got to get up now. And I couldn't figure out why. And I was like, dumbfounded, why is that me laying there? Is what I was thinking. But it was so real. I mean, it was unreal. And then people say, well, it was, in that sleep state, things like that happen. But I mean, I could describe detail about everything, the position I was laying, everything. I was actually looking at me laying there. And I, it's like I stood there and watched myself for a second and couldn't get myself to wake up. I was like, wake up. And by that time, I don't even know how to describe it. Just overwhelming, just sense of fear and dread, like you would never imagine. Just panic, pure T panic came over me. And something made me look toward the door coming out of the den, and there was 3 black shadows. They were like shoulder to shoulder, not real great definition, but they were definitely humanoid shape. Not like you need to see a lot of detail, but they were 3 of them, and they were moving in unison, coming by the mantel, coming behind where my head was, facing right there where the couch was. And it was like I was just trying to tell myself, please wake up. You got to get up now. And finally I did. I snapped up. But when I woke up in a complete, utter panic, just scared to death. and sweating profusely. I jumped up, and the first thing I did when I got up was I turned around and looked behind me because I really expected something to be there. Nothing, not a thing, dead quiet. And it shook me so bad I couldn't even get back to sleep for a long time. And I sit there. I went to the kitchen and got me something to drink, and I sit there, and I was scared. And but eventually I had to get up and go to work next day, so I went back to sleep. But I didn't think much about it. Well, next day, as you know, married couples, that happens when they're going through hard times. They don't speak to each other, and it's sad, but that's the way things work. And she wasn't speaking to me, and I was determined I wasn't going to say nothing to her. We are just going to be ill at each other, and you know, I went in the house that evening after work, and she said, "I want to ask you something." She said, "I know you were mad, but that was a cruel thing you did." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "You come to the door last night in the hall and you stood there and just stared at me." And I said, "No, I didn't." She said, "I saw you." She didn't believe me. She said, "Yes, you did." She said, "I couldn't sleep and I was laying there and I was hadn't I was turned that way. It was dark and I could see you." I said, "You physically saw me standing there?" She said, "Well, who else could it have been? Who else?" And I said, "Well, it wasn't me, I swear." And she laughed. She said, "Oh, you gonna lie too?" And I said, "No, I'm not lying. I mean, it wasn't me." I said, "Well, what did I do?" She said, "I asked you, what do you want? What do you want?" And then you didn't say nothing. And I said it several times, and you just laughed at me in the god awfulest, meanest laugh I ever heard. And I said, "I didn't do it. I swear." And I didn't. It wasn't me. And I told her, I said, "It wasn't me." And she said, "Oh, yeah, sure." So she never believed me, and but it wasn't me. I don't know what she saw in the hallway that night, but it wasn't me. And well, anyway, that was the first thing that ever happened in that house. Well, as time went on, we both would hear things and we would see things and things would get moved, and you'd be laying in bed at night and you'd hear something got awful. It sounded like half the roof fell in, and you think, "Oh my God, somebody's kicking in the front door." You start panicking, and then you get up and you go, and there's nothing. There's nothing on the floor. There's nothing disturbing. You don't know. I mean, it's like the sound don't fit what your expectations are to see. But we even heard what sounded like a gunshot one night. It sounded like clearly like a gunshot went on in the house, and panicked, got up, nothing. Well, she and I divorced. Not long after that, we divorced, and she moved in with her mother at the time. And she left and got all of her stuff and said, it was over. And um, I was in the house by myself there for a good while. She moved on and didn't want no part of the house or anything. And it's just, like I said, I don't like to get into that because that's always hard for anybody to talk about. But anyway, hard times for both of us. And like I said, we're good friends now, and I help her, and I do. I still care about her, want to help her any way I can. I still do. But that was just, we weren't ready. And but anyway, she moved on, and I lived in the house for a while, and I would hear things, and I would continue to see things, and it would like I'd catch shadows out of the corner of my eye, and I would hear her talking sometimes, and I would think there's no TV on in there, and I'd go in there, sure enough, there wouldn't be any TV on, and then the scariest thing that happened after she moved out was I was laying in bed one night, and I would say it was along around 2 o'clock in the morning, somewhere in that time frame. And I had another experience where I felt like I was watching myself, you know, in my sleep, but I was watching myself and I could see my feet, but wasn't really out of my body this time. It's like I was looking at my feet, and I kept thinking, "Oh God, here they come, here they come," And I kept thinking, what am I going to do?" And I saw one. It was not three this time. It was one shadow, and it came to the foot of my bed and stood there, and it was like it was tugging on my feet, and it was like nothing I could do about it. And eventually, I woke myself up, and when I did, first thing I did, of course, was look to see where it was, and it wasn't there. Well, the ironic thing about it was I was off the bed and never had done that before. Always a hard sleeper, and I'd never done it before. I was halfway off the bed, almost to my waist, and I was about to fall off. And my sheets that were covering me were not at the foot of the bed; they were a good 6 feet away from the bed, and they were folded up. They were folded over neatly on the floor, the ones I had just had on me that night. So there's no way in the world I could have done it. There's nothing. I mean, there's no way I could have done that to myself. And people say, well, you could have been sleepwalking and gone over there and folded up and got back in bed. Yeah, I mean, yeah. But I don't, real for real. But anyway, that kind of stuff continued to happen, and I would see stuff, and I would hear things, and finally, I just got to the point. I said, I'm gonna stay awake, and I'm gonna watch, and if this is happening in my sleep, and it's not real, and if I'm imagining all this, because you start questioning yourself, is this real? I mean, do you start even questioning your own mind, and you don't know what to think. And so I said, I'm gonna purposely stay up one night, and I did. I stayed up and I laid there and almost like pretended I was asleep. And I thought, well, nothing's happening. And I would hear noises, but I didn't see nothing. And then all of a sudden, one night I was laying there, and through my doorway, through the heat and all, in walks a shadow person. It was kind of clinging to the wall, but it was moving. And then I had to get my eyes adjusted. I said, well, okay, I'm awake. I'm gonna I'm gonna make sure that I'm seeing what I think I see. And I squinted my eyes and I looked back, and it was still there. And I kind of was petrified, of course. And I said, well, it's going to continue to lay here. And you could almost sense it staring at you. It knew I was awake. And and I stared at it a few minutes longer. It moved, and all of a sudden it moved. But when it moved, it was like from A to Z. It didn't move slow. It was like, and it was in the next position across the room. And so this time I'm panicking. I'm to the point I'm like, oh God. And I sit up, and I take my light on my phone, and I turn it on, and I get out of bed, and I go ahead and flip my light switch on. And so then from that point on, I started keeping the bathroom light on. I kept the light on in the room. I like to sleep in a dark room, but I was so terrified I couldn't sleep in the dark no more. I had to turn the lights on. And so then I said, if this is demonic or this is evil, I need to do something about this. So I started, not being a deeply religious person, but not, at the same time, not a skeptic either. And, always brought up with a sense of, in a Baptist background, and, knew God and had good Christian parents and all that. I said, there's something to this. So I got a Bible. I slept with the Bible literally on the bed beside me. And I said a prayer every night. And I just prayed for protection, basically, that, that this needs to go. And it got better. It got better, and things got with less frequency and everything. And I finally got to where I could get a little peace of mind about myself. Well, several years passed after, and we got our divorce, and my life started kind of getting back to, somewhat sense of normalcy again. And I met a girl, and she had two children. And they were young, and their father hadn't always been there for them and everything, but and so and I've raised them, still with them to this day, and helped raise them. And they moved in with me, and one of the rooms that we converted into a room for both of her girls to stay in. And her youngest one, nothing had happened a long time before they moved in, but her youngest one had some ADHD and that kind of thing. He took medicine for it, bipolar issues. Took medicine for that kind of thing, and that took some getting used to. But they're good children, good kids, But just had a hard life, and we just we was trying to make. I was trying to start over fresh, and have a new family. And but she kept talking about seeing she called it the black man. She didn't know what to use to describe it, what terms to describe it. And she kept saying the black man kept coming to her. They slept in bunk beds. She slept on top. And the other girl, she slept so hard, you wouldn't know, she wouldn't know she was in the world. She slept so hard. But the youngest one, she kept talking about it, and we kind of discredited it for, well, her mother did. But see, I knew the history of the house. And finally I told her, and she said, well, I hope nothing like that's the case. And sure enough, it kept getting more and more frequently. And she started seeing, her mother started seeing it. And we started hearing the noises again. And this time it come back with the doors slam. You can hear a door slam. Well, the girls were getting kind of scared, and I'd already been down this road once and knew, something. So here we go again. I was kind of like, oh God. And we started seeing orbs. All of us started seeing these long, and it was weird because they'd be like balls of light they wouldn't just fade out. They were just dark. They would come out of a room and just hover, and they were fairly large sometimes, big as a grapefruit, and they would float around the room and sometimes turn different shades, and they would go out of one room and go into another, and you could sit there and physically watch them do it. And they were all getting kind of spooked, and I was too. And I'm like, I hope this thing doesn't turn hostile. like it did to me, and didn't know what to do. Just really didn't know what to do. And then one day I was in, I think I was in Walmart, either Lowe's or Walmart, and I got behind a lady that had a shirt on that had something about paranormal investigation, and it had a number on it. And I thought, huh. And I just took the chance. I said, "What is that all about?" And she told me she was with an organization that did research, and they went into homes and didn't cost you nothing. And they went into homes and they did the research, and they would set up the equipment. I said, "Oh shoot, this is bear in mind, this is I wasn't really that much into ghosts, I wasn't thinking that much about it, and didn't know a lot about it." And I said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Well, you want to come over to my house?" They say, "Oh man, yeah, we'd love to come over." Anyway, long story short, we set up a time, and the girls and girlfriend, they went to the mama's house at night. They didn't want to be there because they was already getting really spooked by it anyway. And I told her, I said, "Look, we got to find a way. We got to figure out what this is. We got to get rid of it. We got to get this. We got to do what we got to do." And I said, "We're not crazy." And so this crowd came over one night, and they stayed all about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Came over right at dark, and set up all kinds of IR cameras, and had it walked around with their EVP devices and the Oculus and all that stuff. They had the whole spiel. They had a really good setup. And one of the bedrooms they turned into like a little room where they could communicate back and forth, with each other if they needed to, and had cameras wired throughout the house so she could see it on multiple screens. And things started happening right off the bat. The noises, and they would take pictures, and they would, get plenty of orbs, and anyway, um, make a long story short here. When they were here, there was one man in particular. He was always the kind that was a skeptic. No, he wasn't a skeptic, but he would challenge it. And I got the impression from the lady who started the organization, she didn't really like that idea. But he was a young guy, young buck. He wanted to draw it out, I guess you could say. And he kept saying, "I don't believe you can do nothing." We'd have the spirit box sections and all that kind of thing. And the obvious that's a device I didn't know about until I actually saw it in action. Scans like tremendous amount of radio frequencies, radio stations in just seconds. It can go through hundreds of stations, and you can't really hear any one station, but it will pause every so often, and you get a word. You get a word come out of it, and you knew it was legit because you might ask it a question, and it would give you back intelligent responses like, "Who's here with us tonight?" And it would say a name. They said, "Who owns the house?" And it said my name, and it did that consistently throughout the night. And then they had their digital recorders, of course, that they would ask questions and play back later and get responses, of course. And they were snapping pictures. Well, this one guy, he kept saying, he was challenging this thing. We took a flashlight, and what they do is they take the flashlight and they turn the head to it just enough to where the batteries aren't making connection. But if you barely bump it, you might get might make the light flicker. But if it does that, in theory, on command, and it flashes so many times, and you can tell there's some intelligence behind it, the movement. So they laid it on the floor, and it was a hardwood floor, and there where they laid it on. They laid it on the floor, and we all stood around it, and they said, "Okay, can you move that? Can you turn the light on?" Sure enough, it came on. "Can you turn it off?" It went off. And they asked various questions, and it flickered the amount of times it told us. So there was intelligence behind the movement of this thing. Well, the one boy I was telling you about, it was on the challenge thing. He finally, he said, "That's impressive, but it, I still ain't good enough for me," basically. And he got really kind of confrontational with this thing. And we was trying to determine if it was demonic or just what it was at this point. And he said, "We need more than that. You just need to do something. Do something. If you're all that strong, do something." About that time he said that light went flying across the floor and went and hit the wall as if somebody had kicked it. If you would have kicked it with your foot, and it went with force and hit that wall, and then the cover that was on the light popped off. It hit so hard, and that was pretty creepy. But that was one thing. And he also received scratches that night. He was standing in the living room, and he was challenging it and just calling it out. And all of a sudden, he just grabbed his shoulder and told the lady beside us, "Oh my God, something got bit me or something. I don't know what. Oh my God!" And we pulled his shirt up, and he had three finger marks, like claw marks, that went on his left shoulder. And here's the ironic thing about it, Miguel. My girlfriend collected dolls, and there was a doll of an Indian princess that we got up in like Cherokee or Maggie Valley or somewhere up in the mountains at one of those gift shops that she had in that house. And that doll got to missing. We couldn't find that doll for some time. We don't know what happened to it. And matter of fact, we'd always question, did girls get it? And they said, no, we didn't get it. And we didn't look for that doll. And kind of, wonder where it went.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Was
and
the
one of
doll's name Abigail?
no, no, I
Okay.
don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what the doll's name. It didn't even have a name, but it sat on the mantle. And he, one of the questions he asked it was something, and it came back Indian doll. Indian doll was the name response. Well, the doll wasn't in the room, and as it turned out, this fellow that came up here, he was partly Native American. He's down east. He was partly a Native American. He had an Indian maiden or a woman, you'd want to say, tattooed on his right, on his own, I'm sorry, his left shoulder, right beside where he received his scratches. And we didn't put the two and two together before that. And then after that, she asked me where this doll was, and we told her we don't know. It just disappeared one day. We don't know where this doll's at. Well, in the story there. But anyway, it went on to a lot of things. Once they left the house, she went back for about 3 or 4 days, and she said, I'm gonna do the review, and I'm gonna see what you got." She called me over. I went to her house, and well, she's got her set up. I went through it. She made me two DVDs or CDs, what you want to call them. One of them was video, and one of them was audio. And on the best of the video were an old woman dressed in old attire with like a bonnet sitting in the kitchen on one of the kitchen chairs, just sitting there complacent, looking around. Well, it's a photograph, just kind of looking. And out of the wall, one wall going into the other wall, is an arc of light above her head. That was a really great picture. And then there's another one over the mantle in the den where you could see like something materialized, and you could see like it was like a shadow person, but it had arms lifting up and had two eyes and a mouth that was open, and it was coming up out of the mantle. And then the video was mostly orbs, a lot of orbs, but good orbs. I mean, things you couldn't deny. They would sometimes, even someone would pulse, and change color and pulse and move around. But one thing, when they were setting up, um, at the very start of the whole operation, they were setting up. One of the girls that was there, she went into our bathroom. Well, we got two bathrooms. She went into one of the bathrooms, and out of the kitchen, you can see it's not a shadow. It's a transparent person, the best I can describe it. Like the waist up, you can see they're dressed in old attire and got like almost like a top hat on. And he follows her into the bathroom, right into the bathroom. She don't even see it, don't even know it's there. But our camera's picking him up. And when she goes in there, you see this bright flash of light. And then she never sees the light. She never sees him, but no knowledge of it happening at the time until they played the video back. And so that's the kind of stuff we caught. And as far as EVPs, they caught a lot of like one word or two word, sentences, nothing long. Really was never no long sentences. It was like, but they were all mostly in response to questions. They were intelligent. And they said my name. And I think one of the most ironic things was I got an aunt that's really into that kind of stuff. And she knew all this stuff was going on. And she was about to bust a gourd to come over here and get involved in. And they told me, don't let anybody come over because we don't want any kind of evidence tainted, or we don't want a lot of activity. But she come over that night. I didn't know she was coming. And bless her heart, she come over and she wanted to, and she said, "Well, can I just come in and see what they do?" I said, "Yeah, come on in." And nobody had said her name or nothing. And told the lady running the thing, I said, "She just wants to stay for a few minutes." I said, "Okay." And she said, "Yeah, but don't say nothing. She's got to be quiet and sit here." And so we were doing an EVP session in the bedroom, one of the bedrooms, and she was standing there, and she hadn't been there the whole night. She just showed up, and the obelisk said her name. Now she has I won't say her name, but she has an unusual name, a name that's not very common. And it said her name as plain as day. And for that thing to say her name, and she had never been there until that moment, that was all the evidence we needed. But not long after that, she went home. But anyway, I've got both of those CDs. One of them will not play anymore. I don't know why it will not play. It never, and it wouldn't play at my house. It would never play on any. I had 5 DVD players, and it would not play on a single one of them. But I could take it over to somebody else's house, and it would play perfectly. But the other one would play anywhere. It played here, and it's got some pictures and some EVPs on it. But like I said, one of them just will not play at all now. But I still have that actual DVD with the evidence on it and the case number and everything. So it's a documented ghost encounter. Well, long story short, I won't keep rambling, but the long story short of it all is we said, now that we know it's real, we know it's not just us, it's documentable. What do we do? She said, my personal beliefs are some of the responses it said and some of the scratching people and all that kind of thing. She said, yes, there is an evil presence here, but there's also a couple that's not. She said, I don't know. She said, I think there's multiple hauntings here. And I did a little research, and the only thing I could figure is there was a house beside us that burnt down back in the 1940s, I believe it was. And there was a man, his last name was Hastings. And he lived in that house, and he said he was always kind of, a little bit standoffish and quiet. Nobody bothered him. They didn't want anybody bothering him. So he burned up in that house fire next door. And that house is no longer there. It's a vacant lot. He did burn up in that house, and he was neighbors to my relatives at that time, and I think they knew him, but didn't really have a lot to do with him. And one of the EVPs we got said his name, and when she was calling that out, when I was going over to review evidence with her, and she said, "You know anybody named Hastings?" Hasty, and I said no. And I got to talking to some of my family members who are still old enough to remember that, way back, and they said, "Yeah, Mr. Hasty, he lived next door. He died in a house fire." So that's odd. And I always said he was kind of, quiet man and kind of cantankerous. So his voice came up in one of the EVP sessions here. And, but I asked him, I said, what do we do about this? She said, Mike, what I'm going to do is, she said, I've got a friend that's a priest, and we're going to come in there and we're going to do a blessing. And they came in here and they did a blessing, put the sage out and burnt the sage, what do we call it? Did all kinds of stuff. You name it. And the guy walked around with the holy water, and, he blessed the house. And, ironically, nothing really much happened when he was here. And I know you see things in horror movies and all, like the extras where, it says get out and all this stuff. None of that happened. None of that happened. It was he just come in and did his thing. And I will say that over time, it didn't stop immediately, but over time, it got better. The air was even different feel to it. Everything was just different. And today we don't have any problems, but back then, like I said, even the animals we had in the house. I didn't say this part earlier, but we had pets. Always have had pets. We had an indoor dog, and he wouldn't go into certain rooms. He wouldn't go into certain areas. He would sit and look in one corner of the room and bark and whine, and he wouldn't go in that heating hall. He wouldn't even go in that hall. You could throw him in that hall and he would scratch to get back out. I mean, he saw something. I don't know what, but he saw something. So you know, that convinced me that the paranormal is real, you know, and that was personal and documented. And the reason I had these people come over is because I didn't want people to say, I was a liar. I didn't want people to say you made that up. I don't believe you. I wanted something tangible that I could show somebody. I'm sorry, I'm outside on the porch and there's a moped going by. You probably hear it right now. All right, there it goes. But I had to get out here to get where it was quiet. But and that's ever quiet. But anyway, he's gone. But I had to get some evidence. I had to get something that was tangible. And I wish to God, back years ago when I was in my teens and I saw these things out there at the river, we saw these footprints and these lights in the sky. I would give anything if I'd have had the technology back then to document it, to just prove it, because I think that's what happens to a lot of people that see things. They they just they don't have the means of the wherewithal to do it when it happens, and they go through their lives, people saying, oh, I don't believe you, that. And that's the one thing that happened to me paranormal related as far as the ghost part of it, that I actually did get the proof.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I find it interesting that I mean, not interesting, but how you mentioned the shadow person whenever you and your ex got into a fight. I've noticed a lot of my paranormal experiences were with soured relationships or just associated with relationships in general. And I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
I've wondered many times, maybe it's like the negative energy when you're fighting with your partner or things aren't going right, or I don't know, if you look deep into it and you're real religious, living with someone without being married. I don't know, I've thought about it a lot, and it's like, I wonder why this happened.
Yeah, well, we were actually married
Oh,
when
okay.
when this happened.
Yeah, yeah.
We were married. We were just going through some things, and like I said, I ain't getting into all that, but But
No, no, absolutely not.
and now she's moved on and I moved on, and we're good friends. And I'd do anything in the world to help her. Same here, same for her. But it's just how life is. Things happen.
Yeah,
But
things just happen. Not a lot of times there's no answer for things that
yeah,
happen in your life and take place, but I believe in
yeah,
the paranormal 100%, and it's interesting that she saw it too, and she thought it was
yeah,
you.
yeah. She thought it was me that night, and she didn't stay long enough after that started happening to really ever see a whole lot. But I did, and it's like after it moved itself in based on whatever negative emotions brought it and drew it out. It just kind of latched on to me. I think you would say I could say that kind of it was like it wanted to torment me, and I really do, Miguel. I really do think, and I may be wrong, but I think something happened in this house prior to me buying it. With I don't know if it's satanic in origin, if somebody had ritual in here or what. So there was a pentagram on the closet wall. I think something happened in this house that brought that energy into the house initially. It lay dormant for a while, and when the emotions became strong enough again in that house, it drew it to it. It like a catalyst, it drew it in, and it just preyed upon it. And it built back up to where it had a almost like a virus. It had a host to feed on, and I was in the house, and it just would not leave me alone. And it got to the point, like I said, I was scared, and by myself, I was scared, and I didn't. It wasn't a good feeling. I was like, man, I got to do something about this. That's when I turned to religion. I got the Bible out and I started praying at night before I went to bed and asking for God to help me and look over me. And I'm not a deeply religious person. I mean, that's I just say that. But I believe in God, and I believe and I believe I don't discredit anything. I said, but now's the time. I have got to do something because this is real and this is something that's tormenting me and it's scaring me. And when I saw it that first time, conscious, awake, and I was intentionally fighting sleep. And I said, I am not going to sleep. I am going to see if this is real. If it's not, then maybe it is just sleep paralysis or it's something explainable. But I was awake. I was I was laying there and I saw it come into that room and I saw it staring at me. And you know, that scared me. Just to be flat honest with you, that scared me because then I knew that the other was probably real. It wasn't sleep. It wasn't what I thought it was. And I don't know if I actually had a physical out of the body experience that night. The first night it happened when I saw myself laying on the bed, the three entities coming from around the mantle. Maybe I was actually out of my body. Maybe I actually somehow crossed into the spirit world that night. My own soul saw myself, and I was given the opportunity to um to interact and stop it. And who knows if I hadn't had that opportunity and I hadn't have woke up, what were those three shadow, what would they have been capable of doing is what my always question was. If I hadn't been able to stop it, would they have harmed me? And I would have, and I said, well, maybe they're not physical, they couldn't harm me. Well, maybe not, maybe so, because like I told you, after she left and several weeks to months or so later, that night I was laying in bed, I didn't drag myself off the, I ain't never done it before and never done it since. I didn't drag myself off the bed if I that in a straight vertical position. I would have rolled off the bed. I would have done that. But I was off the bed at the foot of the bed with my feet hanging out and my sheets folded over 6 foot away. And I couldn't have kicked them off and made them fold themselves up, that far away. So, something interacted, and that was whatever that was a physical interaction. And that made a physical interaction with me that night. And that's when I told myself, I said, man, I got to do something about this because if it can do that, it can do more. And I knew then, I said, I've got something demonic going on here. And that's when I really didn't know where to go at the time. I thought, do I go to the church? Do I go to a church? And most Southern Baptist churches, they're not going to know how to deal with something like that. And they're going to think, I don't know, nobody around here would know what to do with that. And I just got lucky. I got really lucky that I saw that crowd out there at the store that was that specialized in that kind of thing, and they helped me put a stop to it.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And Nobody wants to have this activity happening. I mean,
Mm-mm.
sometimes you dabble in it to try to figure out, if there's like a ghost, you ask it to give you a sign or something. But once you start receiving that type of stuff, it really freaks you out and it'll change you. A lot of people wonder, why do people believe in God when there's no evidence and all this? But they're not considering what if people have had these, I don't know, ghostly encounters, demonic experiences. Maybe that's why they believe in God. But a lot of people don't
Yeah,
think
oh,
of it
yeah.
that way because they don't believe in that either. But I mean, I've always believed in God, but I've always wondered, is that really real? Until I had these paranormal experiences, and I was like, man, if this evil exists, no doubt God is real for sure, 100%.
I'll agree 100% with you. I really do.
Okay, Mike.
It's real.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything else you'd like to share? I think we're about a little over 2 hours in.
Oh Lord, I didn't realize I'd lost that. I didn't gone that much time. I've been sitting out here enjoying our conversation.
Yeah, me
No,
too.
Miguel, I really don't. I mean, I could get into the finite details of a lot of things, but that is not time for that. But I've appreciated your allowing me to talk to you about this and enjoyed the conversation. And you do your probably I really enjoy your show, and I think you're doing good work. And I appreciate your time and give me an opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's no problem. Do you think the paranormal experiences you had is associated with the Bigfoot experiences?
I don't know. I really don't know. I
Yeah,
guess
me
that's the
neither.
$1 million question. I don't know. Like I said, it started the Bigfoot stuff and UFO stuff, and I wasn't the only one involved with that. I didn't. That wasn't exclusive to me. That was that back when that happened. That was countywide. There was anybody that would have been in that area of the county probably would have seen something or heard something, and many people did. Um, Unfortunately, back in when it happened, now we're looking 40 years ago. You know, a lot of those people are gone. They're deceased, and and a lot of them are grown people and forgotten about it. But it's always stuck with me in my memory, and then I'm sure my dad's still alive, and he's 80, and he can remember it. So but what happened to me here at house was just a small little my little world, my house within my walls, and and I'm sure there's other families out there that's experienced a lot of people that's experienced paranormal stuff like that. And you think about it, how many of these people that's experienced that don't have the luxury of running into an investigative paranormal group to come in and document it, or and they tell people, oh man, I heard this in my house, and people say, oh, you're crazy, people. And that's why people don't talk about it. That's why people don't say they've seen stuff because people are so quick to ridicule and put you down and tell you're lying or this and the other. And people don't want to be labeled a liar or a fool or something like that. And when you're not, you're telling the truth. But I think that's why a lot of people keep it to themselves. And that's why I did what I did with that paranormal stuff. The stuff that started happening in the house. I said, I'm not going to just ignore this. One, I'm threatened by it. And two, I want to document it. I want to get it stopped. And that's why I had these people come over. So I had tangible proof and I found a solution to get rid of it. And I realized that when I did that there is like you said, there is an evil and there's a good and an evil in this world, and it's their presence is there. And if you're not careful, you can get involved in things that they're dangerous. And that's why people need to live their life the best way they can and treat people nice and be respectful and care about people because life's short and there's a lot more out there than we understand, and it can. That's why you just enjoy every day you got.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, Mike. Well, I appreciate your time and your willingness to share all your experiences with all of us here on Sasquatch Theory. And it was a pleasure to have you as a guest today.
Oh, you too, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And you have an excellent night. Take care.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye. All right, Mike, thank you once again for sharing your Bigfoot experiences with me from North Carolina. And I am sure they left you scratching your head for many years. And I do believe that was Bigfoot activity. I don't know what else it would be, especially in that area. There's a lot of Bigfoot reports coming out from the public. And yeah, they're in there, guys. And it's strange to think that a huge creature like that could coexist with people and rarely ever be seen, but that's how good they are. They're able to hide from us, and there may be something else to it. I believe there's another element to these creatures, and a lot of people report seeing orbs or seeing these creatures just vanish into thin air, which is bizarre, but it is happening, and that's what blows our minds the most, is the fact that a living, breathing creature can just vanish into thin air. The shadow people, I don't know if that's connected with Bigfoot, but I have noticed a trend where people have Bigfoot experiences or possibly an eye sighting encounter, and they have also seen a shadow person at one point in their life. But I don't know, guys. It's a mystery. Anyways, I appreciate everyone for the support, and if you guys can, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until the next one, be safe out there in the forest.